So recently I was talking to a friend about a conflict she had with her husband. The details of the conflict aren't important, but she said something really interesting in the conversation. She asked this question, essentially saying, if men are so good at problem solving, why are they so bad at solving problems within their relationship or even arriving to a moment of repair in their relationship? I hear so many women in my life and on this platform expressing this need to have their problem validated and to tackle whatever is going on in their relationship as a team. I hear so many women saying things to the effect of, I don't need you to tell me if my problem is real. I don't need you to tell me if I have the right to be upset. I don't need you to tell me whether or not I misunderstood something that caused me to be upset. I need you to care that I'm upset. And I think something that happens, not just with men, but it's really a characteristic of privilege, is that when folks who have a position of privilege enter a conflict, they take on an arbitration role. And let me tell you what I mean. So when two people meet on equal footing, right, and they see themselves as equals and they don't see the other person's vision or ideas about them as a threat to their sense of self or their power or anything like that, they generally come to the table in a collaborative fashion, right? I think of conversations I've had with friends where I've said, hey, this hurts me, and they're immediately like, what's going on? There's a pause, there's a listen, there's reflection, etc. I feel like this fails to happen between men and women because men oftentimes remove themselves from the conflict and begin to make decisions about the conflict itself. These decisions can look a couple different ways. It can look like deciding whether or not there is a problem, what the problem is, what the problem is caused by, whether or not the problem is a result of the misunderstanding, etc., etc. On the surface, this can sound like super logical and rational and stoic, I guess, in a lot of ways. But if you dig deep, it's quite different. There's a very subtle, insidious, and frankly violent power dynamic that plays out in these kinds of interactions. Let me give you an example. When we have conversations as Black people about things like police brutality or racism in America, oftentimes we'll be met by white folks, particularly white women, that will point to another problem, citing that as the real problem. When women bring up their issues about feminism to men, men can often say things like, aren't there bigger fish to fry? Aren't there more serious things to worry about? So we obviously know that that is frustrating, distracting, and invalidating. But I think the piece that makes it so hurtful is the fact that the problem is being taken away from the person experiencing the pain of it. Right? So if you've got an issue and I say, hey, isn't there something else here? This is actually a misunderstanding. The person has claimed control over the narrative of the situation for both of us, right? Deciding to arbitrate the narrative. And in doing so, essentially decided the real problem isn't the way that another person was hurt, isn't a result of maybe their careless or unkind behavior. The real problem is the person's response. And I think this shows up a lot of the times between men and women in terms of what the definition of a solution is. Are we trying to solve the problem, like what my friend was experiencing, of her feeling chronically interrupted or frustrated in conversation? Or from her husband's perspective, is the problem the fact that she is upset? And so the thing to be solved is her upsetness, not the chronic interruptions. This kind of conflict doesn't work. It doesn't breed resilience and it doesn't bring people closer. This kind of conflict breaks trust. The main reason being when we go to people that we care about with our problems, we're not really necessarily asking for them to solve our feelings about it. We're essentially saying, I'm having this experience. Your behavior contributed to it. Do you care? And our responsibility as loving, present, invested partners is to go, yes, I do. And from that place of yes, I do care, it becomes you and your partner or you and your friend against the problem. What happens in this other scenario is it becomes the arbitrator of the conflict and their partner against them and their perspective in their narrative. It becomes them against their partner misunderstanding and getting upset. It becomes them against their partner's negative reaction to their behavior. And this creates a fundamental impasse. You can't negotiate from a place like this. Whenever we're arriving to the pain of another person, we have to be able to honor and validate someone's experience. Validation and verification aren't the same. When we validate someone's experience, we want to let them know that we believe them, right? That what they're experiencing is real, even if it is just real to them, and that we care about it enough to listen to it and understand it. This doesn't mean we have to agree with it. This doesn't mean that we have to fact check it. All of that is verification. A very unsettling thing that I see in my comments all the time from men that don't quite understand this concept is they say things like, well, why should I validate something that's not real? Or why should I give energy or attention to something that I don't believe is true? This operates on the premise that we're almost training our partners like dogs, that we're reinforcing their behavior with our attention, and we're taking away our attention, energy, affection, and care when we do not like their behavior and reactions. When we do this in relationships, we're placing ourselves in a position of objectivity, and we're essentially placing ourselves not just above our partner, but above the partnership in general. We're saying that as much as they are capable of misunderstanding, we are in fact not, as we have a perfect, objective, logical, flat view of everything that's going on, every moving piece, and just need to sort of course correct our partner's experience to get them back on track. This is objectification at its finest. This is dehumanization at its finest. Most conflicts at the end of the day aren't even about who's right and who's wrong. They're not about the details and they're not about the facts, and most of the time those things should be left out of it entirely. Conflicts are about arriving to a place where people are able to understand each other and largely understand the effect they have on each other. You can think up and down the street that the way that you close a door when you leave for work is a banal and neutral action, but if it is something that deeply upsets, bothers, and leaves your partner feeling unconsidered on a daily or weekly basis, that is a reality in your life. It is not a reality that your intentions, right, align with their experience. It is a reality that they are having that experience, and that it is your job, if you care about your partner, to understand that and figure out how to mitigate it, right? You don't want your partner to feel that way. That is a suboptimal outcome. So what tweaks, what shifts need to occur in the relationship to get the optimal outcome, which is a sense of safety, belonging, and care? I have a feeling this video is going to get a lot of mixed feelings, and I get why. In the process of writing my book, I've noticed this characteristic shared by both men, women, and friends beyond the binary, even folks in different gendered relationships. And it all ties into this feeling of essentially emotional enslavement. That the very tenets of a relationship that make it sustainable, that make it strong, that make it stable, that we are intended to invest in order to receive the benefits of it, are somehow being coerced from us against our will. That even after 20 years of marriage, we still are at the risk of being taken advantage of by giving our time, care, investment, and energy to our partner freely. That there is some shoe that is going to drop, that there is some upper hand that is going to usurp all of our power or sense of control in the relationship. Again, this is a standoff. When we enter relationships, a lot of the time, I think it's largely because we're in love. We don't necessarily think about what it is that we're doing together. We especially don't often think about why we're doing it together. We don't think about what that person brings into our life that we couldn't pay someone to do. And we certainly don't think about how our lives are mutually better together. And so when issues of conflict arise, in the desire to control a narrative, to protect our own felt or perceived sense of goodness, our own ego, our own fear of being wrong come up, we throw the relationship and our partner under the bus every time to save our own butts, not realizing that this is a kamikaze for the whole operation. Something Dr. Stan Tatkin talks about all the time is the fact that if you want a sustainable relationship, you can't have fights in your own foxhole. There has to be agreement set on how we govern ourselves and each other. And we have to understand that a loss for one is a loss for the entire relationship. That there is, in fact, no winning. There is no victory if everybody's not winning. And it doesn't mean that everything has to be all or nothing. It doesn't mean that there can't be compromises, that we can't use seduction and negotiation to get our needs met and to do that in a way that feels balanced, equitable, and just for everybody. But it does mean that some of these power dynamics need to be examined if we're going to get the full benefit of relationship that I think we're all looking for. At the end of the day, we don't have to pick everybody to invest this deeply in, right? And so when our partner comes to us and they're essentially asking, do you care about this? The answer should be, in action, in deed, in word, in expression, a resounding yes as frequently as possible. We chose to trust this person. We chose to take them on as they chose to take us on, which means when they're injured, we are too, and we need to tend to it accordingly, with humility, with grace, and with curiosity. And you can't get that done if it's more important to be right.